Эксперты тоже. Я не упаду с этого стульчика. Вот твоя табличка. А что, садитесь, наверное? 3 минуты еще осталось. Спасибо. Спасибо. Что? Он уже все есть. Нет, все есть. Иногда качество, оно намного лучше количества. Так ты меня как титруешь, Елена Андреевна? Ты меня как титруешь? Я не общественная палата еще. Еще 3-4 дня я не общественная. Ты тоже? О, тогда смотри. Нельзя, мы...
Сами заберете меня. Ах, кто вы? Так и называйте, не общественная палата.
Но мы не как доверенные лица, нельзя.
Как у вас? С днем рождения.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, let us begin our session. Accessible social services, cooperation between the state and the private sector. I'm really glad to welcome you all, the speakers, the guests, and the experts to our session. The format provides for the panel speakers' interventions. After every intervention, I'll ask questions. Experts will be able to comment on what the speakers have to say. Let me introduce first Svetlana Davydenko, the head of the Social Development Department of Khanty-Mansiysk region, the Deputy Finance Minister Lavrov, Dovdevskaya, head of the Granny Center, Ms. Pasternak, the head of the Social University, Ms. Ushakova, the head of the Pillar of Russia organization, Ms. Yachevskaya, the head of the Development Bank Department. I, together with my colleagues, I myself am the member of the Civil Chamber, though right now I'm not performing this function. I'd like to give the floor first to Mr. Lavrov, because he has an important mission that he needs to complete. Dear colleagues, the diploma of the Moscow Financial Forum on attracting private entrepreneurs to the social sphere goes to the administration of the Tambovsk region, and the deputy head of the region is going to be awarded the prize. The mission complete. Now we can start our work. Today we are going to speak about the ways to improve the social services, what needs to be done to satisfy the demands of our population in this sphere. Why is that important? You know that for the past years we've been discussing the improvement of social services. It is an important objective. It's not something that goes without saying. According to the polling data, our population is never fully satisfied with the quality of services. So we need to do something to satisfy people more. Why is that happen? I'm not going to dwell on that, but I believe it's important to mention that people across the globe become more and more sophisticated users. They themselves develop, and that's why they have higher expectations. Speaking about healthcare, for some time it was enough for the people to receive some very simple medications, some basic medications and services. They could restrict themselves to antibiotics. Now the sphere has become a lot more sophisticated. There are different tests, there are many different treatment procedures, a lot of new drugs. So the demands become more and more sophisticated, complex, much more individualized. Therefore, the services we provide should comply with the new criteria. Unfortunately, this sector does not develop as fast as the demand does. Therefore, we are all hoping that the quality of the services we provide could be improved through improved competition. Just for up till now, the main part of all of the services is provided by the state. It seems that with the similar situation, the services quality would hardly be improved, but we know that there are new players on the market. There are non-commercial organizations, NGOs that create innovative services, and the business circles also take part in that area. The organizations are growing bigger, there are new opportunities for them. There is the new legal basis that is going to, and framework that is going to be implemented and foster the work in this area. We all know, however, that there are certain limitations and they cannot be dealt with that fast. Today we need to speak and discuss those issues that would help us to improve services in the public sector, how the funding could be distributed between the older and younger institutions in the area, how the efficient public sector could be maintained, and what are the new service providers. Let's discuss the following. I wanted also to say a few words on the time limit. I would ask our speakers to limit themselves to 7 minutes and experts to 5 minutes. Svetlana, you are the first one I would like ask to speak. You represent Khanty-Mansiysk region. A lot of people know that your region has been quite successful. You managed to attract private corporations. Unfortunately, there are not so many regions who develop as good as you do. What can be done for the other regions to reach the same level? Well, I believe it's a success story, but it has its own ups and downs. The regional government created a special fund for social services. We had lack of kindergartens. The social council and the governor's office was ready to get engaged into this program, and that's how all of this started. There was a great waiting list for the kindergartens. That was the time when we started to establish private kindergartens. There were also some kindergartens that were created through PPPs. We closed some old kindergartens. They were the ones that were provided for the kids from 3 to 7-year-olds, but now we have more nursery schools. This year we also grant certificates of professional education, so we try to find new formats that would be more efficient. Speaking about social development and social services, we followed into the steps of the most advanced countries. We tried to satisfy the needs coming from the grassroots. There should be legal framework established in the first place. Let me show you what we used. We established this framework. There was the roster of social services providers. Why the roster? Because in this case, we do not have to provide licenses, since there are not thresholds for controls. Next important moment, we wanted to make this business attractive. Speaking about social services, you know, it's not that easy. Education and healthcare are more promising, but the social market doesn't look that bright. We saw that nobody was interested. There were no specialists. Nobody knew the laws. Nobody knew how to act at this market. So we began working with our competitors. You know that the public sector is something that we had as a heritage, but we needed to create the non-public sector, the private one, and it was our own job. Now there are 219 providers from PPP, so there are 53 provided by the government and 163 are non-state. We want the market to be active in this area. Well, you say that you yourself brought up your competitors. Not many regions are ready to do that. Well, you need to do that because that makes the states more interested in developing some areas which were underdeveloped. What about jobs? When we tried to find balance between state and non-state actors, we needed to find those who could provide the non-commercial organizations, the NGOs. Well, some of them went bankrupt, but some of the companies have a strong platform. So we ourselves created this business through the previous public, engaging people who used to work in the public sector. Of course, we have to be cautious. Individual entrepreneurs, those who work in the non-state sector, get interested into healthcare business. So this is the platform that we started to elaborate. As regards support, government needs to create conditions that would be favorable. So we have tax benefits, there are also property benefits and fiscal and financial benefits. What we did and what was important is that we suggested to use those measures that were specially elaborated by our experts, but you could look into that a bit later. What were the platforms? We launched resource centers in every area. There were credit organizations, the innovation centers for the social sphere. These are the centers where we'll learn and teach how to improve entrepreneurial skills, how to improve financial literacy. Though it seems that we haven't been engaged enough with social funds, we do not know how to borrow from the government, how to borrow from the state. So we yet need to train people in that. For financial support, we have several strategies. We cover losses, we subsidize, there are also procurement and personified service financing. We try to elaborate strategies to support those who want to provide social security services. It seems to be that this area hasn't been sufficiently developed. That's why we decided to grant special certificates that would enable greater competition, would broaden the variety of services. That makes the services more accessible. So here are the certificates that we grant. There are social care workers, etc. The area that we find quite important is digital services. So we have our own website where you can access and learn more information about that. You know, we even have a social Uber. Thank you so much. We now have some strategies and recipes to improve the situation, to create and enforce competition, new organizations, establishment. Well, maybe not everyone would agree that it would work for every region. Somewhere you need to support the agencies that are already in place. What you've been saying, that we could attract former public sector workers, granting certificates, that's another strategy, as well as resource assistance, financial assistance. I wanted to ask Ms. Koriteva, the Social Chamber member, do you agree to this strategy? What would you add? Well, you know, what Svetlana said covers the most groundbreaking practices. We go to different regions. You know, we have the Khanty-Mansiysk region, we have Tambov region here. We've just come back from the Khabarovsk region. In some places, the strategies involve the reaction to the situation. In some places, the solution remains something that is done on paper. The proposals voiced by Svetlana or colleagues from other regions, or the developing regions, have good ideas and good proposals. However, their development level is different. There are some that are very successful, and it's not that easy to implement success stories for everyone, because a great number of problems that arise in the social sphere are different. The limitations include the legal framework at the federal level. If there is financing that comes from loans, not all entrepreneurs have access to that. Well, you know, if it's done in one place, that could definitely be done in other places. Well, that depends a lot on the municipalities and their work with the private sector. That's what we are seeing in St. Petersburg and Khanty-Mansiysk. You have 166 private providers. Of course, the situation is different everywhere, but for the best practices to be fulfilled, there should be the will in the municipalities, there should be the dialogue between various sectors, and of course, there should be better skills of those people who are involved in the process. Thank you so much for your comment. Now we are getting close to another interesting issue, the new law on municipal procurement.
We started to talk about that in one subject. Some measures quite interesting are being adopted. And the small ones like certificates, some loan financing, and in the other subjects, when we come and negotiate with authorities and non-commercial organizations, they find various reasons why they cannot do it. No, it is impossible. We cannot introduce such form of certificates, like financing loan is not possible, and this or that is not possible. And I don't know, maybe they don't want it. Maybe there is no federal framework which would allow them to do that. That's why we hoping so much for the new law, which we will be able to listen about from Sergei Mikhailovich. And now I'd like to ask Svetlana Gennadievna about the following. Svetlana Gennadievna, your center is always following the situation, is analyzing the situation in the regions constantly, is analyzing a normative and regulatory basis and practices which exist. A lot has been done. And in the very beginning, this opening of this new access for new non-public suppliers of services to the market. These measures, which have already been adopted, how do you evaluate them? What was successful, what was not successful, please tell us. Thank you. Can I have a presentation? I will try to very generally answer the questions of Yelena, and I think I can say yes, there are absolutely diverse practice in the regions, and at the same time we can say that now we're calculating the rating about 12.84 for you not to have an opportunity to see what are the regions. As I'm not saying, yeah, I closed it deliberately, but you can, by the picture, you can see that generally these are the diverse options which were achieved in various administrative practice. These are some administrative practices. And it's absolutely clear that all regions are working in a single legal framework and find different possibilities to do that. How it can be used, like the use of Khanty-Mansi Autonomous Region, St. Petersburg, Leningrad region, Perm, so on and so forth. From my point of view, one of the approaches is that every region has to see and to find its own practices, which in almost every segment exist. Among them are certificates which existed in the Russian Federation as municipal practice very often. It refers to the services like a taxi for handicaps in 17 municipalities of the Russian Federation. It's quite a lot. And you have to understand that you have this experience already for extra services, preschool education. Use it because now there are big blocks in the best practices between these spheres. That's why the ideas are related to like having a marvelous region named after Pasternak, which accumulates possible municipal practices. You cannot make only white books from that practices. There should be box solutions together with federal bodies of executive powers. Add to the powers both the normative and legal basis and administrative resources. There should be some recommendations added from the federal bodies of executive power. Very often the recommendations from Ministry of Finance are requested from Ministry of Labor, where we cannot demonstrate the fixed, like paved road of normative and regulatory basis. We can propose like various modal solutions. I think it is available. The next thing refers to where we are going to develop this market. The market exists already. If we presuppose that the market is developed in a competition, if we imply that we do it in the existing conditions, I don't quite get why do we have to make it too complicated. There are budget things, budget entities. We can increase the availability of that service, but involving the non-state suppliers, we suppose that we increase both the assortment, the quality, and the quantity of the services. These services can be various, and they have to be linked to the fact that the instrument and the draft law are important, and the quality is really important to introduce innovations in the social sphere itself. And on this slide, I'm trying to say that here we have to involve non-state suppliers of services and organizations into that innovative process to the organization of the network, selecting such dimensions and priorities which are multifunctional. And advance in investments, innovative technologies, and flexible service suppliers will give us opportunities for that innovations. Having that priorities that you see, like lack of dependence from social support, increase of communication with state, support of healthy lifestyle, not to spend lots of resources for treating the diseases, social activeness, active households, which are one of the trinity of the instruments of social policy. We can go to various dimensions which are needed to establish new type of communication between the public, non-commercial and commercial suppliers and budgets entities in the sphere of hospital supplementary and division from various flows, outsourced services, complex assistance, prevention, and so on. These practices exist. They exist in every sphere, and they amount to 20 in 20 regions. This can be mobile brigades for household support, schools for training of treatment of elderly people and handicapped people, technologies of emergency button, biblio, buses and other forms of other forms which develop the possibilities as a supplier of services of the household and of family as a block entity. Moreover, we have to understand one more problem exists. We can speak about competition, but if the resources, inter alia, the budget ones will be withdrawn in such a big volume to overcome administrative barriers, we're going to lose. The administrative barriers are numerous, and the problem is that they lay in various segments. There are general ones, general obstacles. There are individual ones for the public organizations, like a public organization, non-commercial organization for social services, start material support if they're doing a profit activity, or they're artificially reduced in their possibilities. The requirements is to make the schedule blocks the resource. We have to understand that these barriers are numerous, and debureaucratization of the social sphere will be beneficial and has to accompany every development of competitive mechanism in the spheres of social sphere, the segments of social spheres, and general solutions for social sphere and separate individual solutions. Sometimes this is not a blocked list of requirements, unset procedure of payment and reception of bills, etc. It should be reduced, and I constantly give this as an example because the tax inspection is the most scary instrument which creates obstacles. They think that's an established procedure with clear rules. Nobody is playing a monkey with a grenade, and they are doing that. Barriers is not the highest ones. We have the convincing results. Here we have social important indexes speaking about existing competition and sustainable service suppliers. For example, average share of non-state suppliers in social sphere in Moscow and Perm region amounts to 18%. This is good indexes. Share of children in private kindergartens in Samara region amounts to 13. Non-state suppliers of medical supply in Leningrad region is 49%. Non-state suppliers of social services in regional register in Khmao amounts to 72%, and so over 77% in Bashkiria. Convincing results for budget spheres of non-state suppliers, 4%. Competitive mechanisms, 44 law for Tatarstan and Permsky regions, 4%. Share of budget means supplied by non-state suppliers in Tatarstan, 6%, and Samara, 5%. And we have separate administrative practices which help to reduce the barriers to special payments, like there are free advertising billboards for Belgorodskaya Oblast, which amounts to reduce the expenses for cost for social exams. And as it is being followed according to the information delivered on the slide. And non-commercial organizations will need to have a possibility to reduce the cost for administration by organizing infrastructure of accompanying infrastructure, and it should be accessible by foot. There are regions, for example, in Krasnodarsky region, to support this non-commercial organizations right in place. I think these are the dimensions which have to be developed for the establishing market to be perceptible and socially efficient. Oksana was saying that in yesterday we were listening to the presentation of Khabarovsk region. They have quite a new interesting thing. They made a resource center for non-commercial organization for suppliers of social services to be a mediator between them and the authorities and to assist them to reduce administrative extra costs and solve other issues in the process of their communication. Alexander Spivak, our expert of for protection of children from cruelty, etc. Maybe you would add something or argue, Svetlana, about those who would like to understand the measures which have already been acknowledged and taken. How efficient they were. The time has passed. Law 442, federal law, was adopted. Other normative acts. Now, after all this time, is it possible to say that something was efficient, something was not, and something is urgently to be changed? Of course, the practices appear because the regions in general and the segments react on the messages from the president, and the complex of measures, it cannot be left without any reaction. But as for the statistics, we do not have quite a big pool of statistic data. But we constantly see, while having the events, we see some real cases in real life in various regions. In general, it's clear that it will not happen overnight in few months. From absolutely monopoly system will become competitive with some competitive access. But if we assess the rapidness of operation, despite of huge number of practices and regional models, I think for the moment we can generally characterize it like a system is going slowly still. And at the entrance, the non-commercial organizations and non-professional, the third sector, have the understanding that we are doing very good and positive things which are made in a very complicated manner. And we help real people, and in many cases it's a very professional work. Sometimes it's not professional, but it is felt as a useful one. And from this side of the state, it is perceived like we have a systematic work, we have normative basis, regulations, and a whole network of service providing. And here we have some newcomers who are might be dangerous from the quality perspective in bodies, and they are really hard to combine. Those who have to take the decisions on the level of subject of the Russian Federation are are often looking for easiest ways out. Probably the draft law, which is more systematic approach, would cover that into some general framework and will make it a system working all over the country. For the moment, we see in many cases an attempt to find a simple way out. Establishing a non-commercial organization. Here there is a systematic problem because the key index is a general volume of budget money transferred to the organizations which are non-commercial organizations. And within this index, organizations who were created on their own are not seen, or maybe they were created by the initiative of the authority, or who took the traditional services or new services were taken who are in greater demand. It is not seen, and this gross index speaks of quite a few important things and gives quite a few information. And why it is important to speak about that in the Ministry of Finance platform, because it is rarely analyzed. The central point, the core of decision-taking process is the federal profile executive authority body. Those bodies who are responsible for implementation of the roadmap of state policy in this segment are in most cases, are economic ministries, like financial ministries, entities. In the region, regardless of created 85 coordination councils who actually work, we have lack of practical application and technology of creating solutions of in the segment or in the field, or to explain the capabilities of regional authorities, in which cases what solutions are appropriate. Sometimes they fall back from regional practice. There are no typical answers on typical questions. for the representatives of the regions. And quite a long process of agreeing on that, on discussing of that. On the federal level, it's seen that the region can take the best practice of Khanty-Mansiysk, Khabarovsk and implement it. The region cannot do it because it's not a solid thing. In the region, there is an interested person, some social entity or educational entity who is ready to move in this direction, but he is most probably is not a top personality, is not a decision maker. And in order for this decision to pass, you need the whole system of measures on the level of financial ministry, on the level of control ministry, directors of the entities, and sometimes on the level of prosecutor's office, which has to come and to see it as non-targeted expenses, non-targeted use of budget funds. In this case, what I want to recommend, what is really important, without essential considering the consideration of this or that segment, these tasks are almost unsolvable. Without defining the services which exist there, because people are used to that and the priority list has changed. If there is a regional protection, pays attention not only to the organizations which it knows is used to cooperate with, but to the whole spectrum of it, would take, and it's also an administrative barrier because we need a person who will take a database, can contact with the resource center in our ministry, sees through the list of all the potential organizations who can be in this market somehow, make a quality analysis of practices of these organizations, not trusting it to some emotion. It's a very thorough work. Without this work, it's impossible to find an ease to introduce the public sector in those budget things where it is useful to the citizens, like non-commercial ones. There is also a temptation to make it formally or in list or judging by 2 or 3 leader organizations which will never let you down. And this work inside on the regional level is not supported by resources, not supported by personnel. And it is all done between 35 or 45 administrations without having, like, we understood the remedy. I just wanted to react. I disagree. Well, I agree generally, but I understand that there is a corridor of opportunities. Such inventarization of the segment, looking through a microscope how many other various suppliers exist, is absolutely impossible with huge administrative costs. There could be step-by-step administration as regulatory estimation. We want to create this tariff. Who is ready for this tariff? Please come and we'll find a certain number of people. Now you suggest a solution that the remedy would be worse than the disease. Who do you agree with, Alexander and Svetlana? In my part, I agree both, because here we have room for improvement. The corridor of opportunities still exists. And here we appointed those points which we have to work on, like the public sector, first of all, to understand primarily and to develop this market. We have to understand where should we go to, what are we developing, where are we going to. But we agree with Alexander Mikhailovich that it should be based on real data. It's true. Like, it's a simple first step, and we speak a lot about that. At the same time, it has not been done everywhere for the moment, regardless of creation of coordination councils. Okay, let's move on.
Ms. Pasternak, you have the floor now. We know that your university is very active in elaborating strategies for PPPs. And there are some areas that concern social services. Well, let me begin. Speaking about specific achievements in launching the social services market, today, of course, that is a very difficult issue and a very sensitive one, because today there are several areas, for instance, healthcare, that could boast some good results as regards PPP's establishment. If we take a broader look at the situation, of course, there are not so many success stories. There are institutional barriers and obstacles. The overall list of measures that need to be undertaken in order to open the social sphere to entrepreneurs is something that means social responsibility. The goals that are set forth by the President and the program 2024 are impossible to achieve without the PPPs. Let me tell you about some of the limitations. The social sphere means and seems to be perceived as something that should be paternalized by the civil society and the state itself. So it seems that there are these superstitions about the way that actions are taken in the area, even though we have very good strategies for PPPs. There are important projects in, for instance, providing services to elderly people. Another issue is the lack of service operators. There are good practices as regards long-term care, but do we see that these practices are sustainable on the larger level? Because we know that there are some successful projects, but can we say that the whole field could be made successful? Another important question concerns some shortcomings in the legislation. Here, I'd say that there is not sufficient legislation framework in the sphere of the PPPs. As for real estate, what goes to the private organization, how could we make infrastructure transfers that may not be needed for the PPP implementation? So here we know that there are some improvements and amendments to be introduced into the law. Another aspect is the delegation of powers. What is decided at the municipal level? What could be decided by the company? So here, some changes should be introduced. Another important block of issues includes creation of financial tools market that could lay the foundation for investments in the social infrastructure. Since the social sphere is a lot less profitable, the investments tend to be more risky in this area compared to the transportation or the other services like utilities. What products could appear on this market? There could be infrastructure bonds or some other instruments to support and assist participants at the federal or municipal level. There could be investment, loan-taking instruments. So that's what we need to provide. Another aspect I want to mention is the terms for PPP's implementation. Unfortunately, right now, when we speak about timeframes, that is something that is fraught with risks, because public partners are also afraid of taking risks in this area. That depends on how great are the risks to be borne, what are the prospects for the long-term development. You know, in the sphere of care for the elderly, some risks seem to be clear. But in other areas, we cannot say that there are a great number of projects. Every project is unique. That's why when at different meetings we discuss solutions for the fields, for the whole field, it is very difficult to be based on particular examples, because we cannot take them as a template. We also discussed possible use of PPPs in education. A very simple question. Can we use PPPs to build dorms for college students? Seems to be an easy question, but it turned out that there is not sufficient readiness for this step. Universities take part in these practices, but they do not propose legislative initiatives, so therefore there is no legal framework at the federal level. Hence, that's what we need to create in order to create PPPs, more efficient PPPs in the sphere of public services. Thank you so much, Natalia, for your intervention. We've been speaking about private-public partnerships for a long time already, and it seems to be a very important instrument that could be used to render public services and social services, but they don't seem to be very efficient right now because there is no legal basis. Do you think there are some benefits? Are there any tax benefits for people who establish PPPs? Well, as regards taxation and fiscal benefits that we provide to boost investment, there should be measures taken at the federal and the regional level, because we need to set forth the priorities for all the actors at the market. We have some people from Sberbank here. We have the executive director of Sberbank, please. You have the floor. Natalia, thank you so much. I think I won't make a breakthrough discovery for you when I tell you what happened. Sberbank has decided to implement its strategy for PPP's establishment. There are only 4 banks. People are mostly interested in big projects because they can make more money, and they prefer long-term projects. As for the role of the government and the state, we cannot say that it's very active in utilities, kindergartens, or schools. You can say that there are small projects, but there are so many of them that could be quite interesting. A year ago, we made the decision to get engaged with PPPs to access the market. We have taken some decisions in the sphere of education, in the sphere of utilities, and also some solutions for the elderly. Some testing has already been done. Thanks to colleagues for certificates, because that helped so much for us to get across all the legal difficulties. As for the legal framework, you know that there are some problems here for the standard solutions even. Concessions is the instrument that we are a lot more used to. We know what would be the attitude of the judiciary. You know that in case of concessions, the entity belongs to the government. So if the contract is repealed, then the company would lose everything. So right now, we have no idea what the state actions would be. So it seems that there are these problems in the legal sphere. The procedures are still unclear. As for something that is desired in this area, we have a lot of documents. You know, there are requirements that do not seem to be very precise. But we have, for instance, some good instruments that we give out to investors, so it makes it easier for them to get funding from the bank. The questions that are addressed to us regard fiscal regulation, how this contracts could be enforced at the regional level. It makes me think about something that's been voiced here already, sharing experience from the federal level to the regions, because here we see that there are some collisions, some concession agreements do not function in the regions, and we do not know what to do. We go to the Ministry of Finance, we try to seek compromise, and that concerns many, many areas. So what could be done? There could be methodological recommendations that would be put forth by the government. They should be comprehensive, that should show how that or this decision affects the market. That is the issue that is yet to be discussed. We understand that that's what we need, and we are ready to cooperate with the state. As for our plans, we will elaborate the type agreement for the water supplies, and if we'll see that there is interest in the regions, then of course we will be on that market. Because so far, concessions seem to be the only instrument. Thank you so much. I'm looking at Alexei Sidnev because we've been discussing services to the elderly, the care services, and he's the person who is deeply engaged into that. But I'm not going to give the floor to you. But next, maybe, you know, at some point I'll ask you what would be your comment on this situation. Right now, I should yield the floor to the Financial Development Institute. I think that is the first time that they're taking part in this discussion. We'd like to hear from you, Svetlana. How do you see the role the banks could play in this area? Do you have any ready-made solutions? Some cookie-cutter solutions that other people could use? Do you think there is the need for the new instruments to emerge? Thank you so much. Hello, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. I'm really glad that we made this connection between banks and best practices in PPP's establishment. I'll try to make these discussions are more optimistic as regards PPPs and new financial instruments. I wouldn't say that the situation is so dire. Let me take the side of financial ministry. It seems that this is the ministry that's turned into a real platform for discussions. It is the ministry that sees how inefficiently we use the public finances. Every year we see that the funds that are being allocated to the public sphere are becoming bigger and bigger. But what are the results? I'm very confident that nobody would say what is any effect at all. We cannot really formulate. Why cannot we say anything about this? Not because we cannot count, but because we do not know how to assess our success. So what be the financial model? As some previous speakers have mentioned, there are good examples on the market. What are the best examples? They come from private companies. I know one successful PPP, only one, but I know a lot of successful private projects in this sphere. But that would not be sufficient for the whole population because it's rather costly.
What should we do? We should just take the best practices of these people because they learned and they're professionals, and now they are doing better than the public entities managed to do it. We have numerous public entities. Why they do not compete with each other? They have no motivation for that, for competition. They are fully supplied with sufficient amount of public resources which they use to perform their tasks. If they wanted to build, they build, okay. They train somebody, they cure somebody if they succeeded. In the end, what is their final result? The level of they will get the necessary level of education, of cure, of capital development, which meets today's requirements. I think everybody can say more no than yes to that. What is the role of Vneshekonombank? Vneshekonombank has become a full-scale participant of implementation of national projects. Today it is playing two roles. First one as an expert. I'm going to tell about the new financial instrument which Vneshekonombank has recently actively been promoting. And we have high level of readiness for implementation of pilot projects. And the second role of Vneshekonombank is obviously a role of potential financial institute. Here we are very different from commercial banks because using certain support of government, of state, which is added to the national projects, Vneshekonombank can provide certain rate for implementation of that. I mean, credits, yes. It could be good cooperation with syndication like Sberbank and other banks when VEB could take the most part of credit risk via syndicacy. We would get lower rate. Now I want to describe the new financial instrument, to describe the essence of that. Then give the example. We have only 2 minutes left. So as usual, we don't have it for the most important one. All right, so this is social input bonds. These are projects of social influence. What is the key essence of this instrument? In order to implement and perform social service, we have private investor performing this service on his own expense. The state, while implementing that, financially does not participate at all, but the state, by its contractor, fully formulates its social effect, which it expects to see in the end. Investor is performing his project 3 or 5 years, and we fix the effect. If the investor achieved the order, performed the order, the state fully covers the expense of investor and the margin which investor gets for that. That's a tested instrument, but not in Russia. Yes, it is really actively being tested in Europe in social sphere. For 10 years, it is 10 years old. For example, it is actively being developing. Russian Federation has fallen back just a little bit. We have only started to promote it, and we can say that neither one SIB has been launched, for example, for the moment. But in the near future, I think we will manage to launch. That's a very prospective instrument, and we have only professional investors in the market because risking our own money. There's no risking for the investors. Only those who know perfectly in the sphere of education, the sphere of healthcare, gerontological centers, they know what should be done and they know what quality the clients expect to have, to see. So not to spend too more time, I represented the scheme on this slide, how the SIB is working. What is the role of Vneshekonombank? Vneshekonombank is operator of this SIB. The goal of Vneshekonombank is to formulate financial model, to assist the state to formulate the financial model and the social effects, to calculate the business model of the project, to select investor in the market, to connect all the necessary guarantees of the state, because investor has to trust to the state that in the end, achieving this effect, he will be paid back. Here we have normative and legal regulation, signing certain necessary agreements, and obviously the bank is performing coordination and follow-up of the whole process up to the moment it is implemented, and all the final transferring of funds from government to the investor. It has international positive results, and let me show you the second slide. Two examples which we performed with the regions, and we think them to be really realistic. For example, the increase of the quality of education. Small-scale regional village schools are united in a single pool. We create the necessary infrastructure on the basis of these schools. We reduce the number of teachers who does not meet the goals and the requirements, and their level does not meet the quality which is needed. We make a remote education through central schools. Investor fully takes responsibility together with the provider, the organization of the whole chain. In the end, in the long run, we see the first results. The joint exam, the unified exam results should go up. That's the only criteria we have for today. At the same time, bearing in mind that most part of them are small-scale schools, we will have a chance to reduce the volume of costs for maintenance of this school, for operating these schools. We'll have double effect here. Both are calculated and expressed in specific indexes and results. The same model is proposed to be used in gerontological centers. This is elderly people care. The model is very thoroughly developed. This model is developed better than the others. We see how it could work today, PPP together with SIBs. We derive from practices of best private companies who offer that in the market, and we're really glad. I can see in the audience, I see our advisor consultant who thanks him indeed. He's sharing his experience with us. This is company Third Age. We'll give the floor to them, by the way. I'm just giving that bridge to them because I'm taking from their time resource. So I hope that Sergei will say more about how this model is going to work and how we see the connection of return of funds by the government, the contract, the order of the government for the social segment, and high quality from private investor can secure the high-level social effects and the final economic effect which President requires by his May orders and national projects. Thank you. Thank you. It is really, really interesting. Can you please tell how long do you work with SIBs? 6 months. Natalia Borisovna, I suggest maybe we invite WEB to the public chamber and probably some non-commercial organizations. We can invite the business, and we can. I heard for the first time that in Russia we operate like that. Maybe it was not only me who doesn't know about that. Indeed, it's a new tool, and not everybody heard about that. We actively promote it. We are ready to promote, to help you in promoting that. We're using this tool. We'll do it in Sochi within the framework of investment forum. Let's do it in our chamber as well. Yep. We are using all the public platforms to promote it, but we're also actively involved with working in regions using the web platform. We are operating in calculating the model. Wow, it's really amazing. Thank you. And now let's give the floor to Sergei Anatolievich Krivosheyev, representative of the Third Age Ltd. joint stock company. Thank you so much, and for giving me that bridge. That by Alexandra Viktorovna. Indeed, today we heard some phrases, and 2 panels were. I attended them. I came there where there are deputy ministers and representatives of Vneshekonombank, the banks of development. That speaks about the fact that our segment, the topic of social services, the issue of people of older generation, are not only our trouble, our problem, our issue, but solving the goals and the tasks which are appointed by the President and the government and Ministry of Finance and the Institutes of Development. Basically, indeed, we have experience. We have the understanding of how we can operate here. That's why we share our best practices. Today, we heard that probably the private is better than public, but in different cases it's compared different manner. I have not been in Khanty-Mansiysk. I will definitely come to you. But the simplest thing here, the easiest one, is who is investor and who is the one to pay. And when you invest your own money in something private, you treat it absolutely different to the resident or to the patient who is staying there, and you treat everything else in a bit different manner. But we are living in a state, and today it's not a pleasure that today we have that serious negative feedback. Like 40 years ago, best practices appeared in the Western Europe. SIBs operate active for 10 years. These are the people who outrun the time. A few years ago, I was realizing that the main investment characteristics are the creation of best practices, what I was basically doing in pharmaceuticals in production and so on. And then our main perfect words like IPO, PNN. And today I feel the story like here within Russian Federation. We perfectly understand that both the chamber, the regional representatives, the ministry, the Institute of Development, the dress of the president is about what should work. If basically speaking we get back to the Moscow Financial Forum, the main topic is inviting investors. To me, investor can come only when I give a quality service. I can give a quality service when I invest my own money. We passed through this phase. We are ready to develop. We are ready to support completely the topic referring to PPP. We know how to do it, and we know how to expand it without the role of the state in our sector. Even with the condition of investing private money and increase of best practices, everything else is impossible. The state has to support the best practices. That's why we, together with Bank and major state banks and financial institutes, that's why we communicate with them so closely. Given my expert estimation of the situation, time in the whole world, it's tens of billions of dollars in the country, in this market, and this is absolutely not covered. I think there is certain reason to work in the market with tens of billions of dollars in Moscow Financial Forum. Not only in hydrocarbons, happiness does not come only from hydrocarbons. A service is better than hydrocarbon. Thank you. Thank you. You are absolutely within the time limit, and you brought a different bridge to the speech of Natalia Vladimirovna. Okay, you see, there is such a market, there's such a big volume of opportunities, and we have perfect practices of when business comes to the sphere of social services. But it's still, we still would have to see more. What are the obstacles? Of course, we all want to see more. And I would like to go directly to the numbers and say that in all the share of social entrepreneurs among the representatives, the total of representatives of a small-scale business, it is only 1%. If we see the practice of Germany and the U.S., the private companies provide social services to 90%. If we're speaking about care, about educational these things. So of course we have room for improvement, and you're absolutely right. There are certain barriers which prevent us from doing that. They are general ones, common ones, and Svetlana Gennadievna has already come through all of these topics. I don't want to get back to her classification. Still, I would like to use this platform to express a few ideas where the platform could have solved some issues for us and can do it better for us. The first story is that social entrepreneurship does not exist legally and legally fixed, and there is no federal law. That's the first point. The second point, I was speaking about that. National projects of small-scale businesses on the way and development of individual entrepreneurs initiative. Where about social entrepreneurship, there is only one point, which refers to the federal law 209 on development of small-scale, medium-scale entrepreneurship, where everything is described about social entrepreneurship. That's I'm speaking about the federal level of perfectness of imperfection of legislation. That does not correlate, and you can see that business has no cannot be convinced why cannot say for sure why they should go there and what are the possible problems. When the PPP started years ago, immediately after the development of these projects where business entered and started bringing money, legal practices began. This is described not in this or that matter. So business decided to withdraw. Mainly, what we have to do, everybody knows the demographic hole which waits us till the year 2030 will require new services, new social services. And that's an absolutely new line. We have the following suggestion, the following proposal. We are on various platforms, so we discussed it with the social entrepreneurship. Credit money organizations, they managed to get together, have more money, and to create their own autonomous, non-commercial organization where they are trying, by the means of their various institutes, to influence legislation and to make it better to ride through models of development, both regional and federal, and see the best practices and to do it biometrical identification and this things like these things. All the experts said that we have to make a database both of the consumers and the recipients. It is on different levels. Everybody's trying. Some people try to do something. It's time to speak about digitalizing the system for social sphere, for all the projects that exist, and this has a good name, soctech, like fintech. This is a social technology which enter in various spheres of life of just a human being, formulate that social and economic development of the country, which all our budgets are about 3-year cycle, big state public programs. That's why we have to speak more about the quality and availability of the social network, dealing with digitalization and the level of technology, the basis for this technology, for the business to be able to count on, and to be developing municipalities. This is an opportunity to sell their services on a platform. Contract system has definitely given a certain push to it, a certain impetus, but it's hard for the small-scale and medium-scale business. So the initiative of the Ministry of Finance and making a law on social order has always been supported by board, and we await this law because it will definitely help to compete with GUP and SMUP and give the quality and give the better list of services. Generally for social entrepreneurship, we know 5 or 6 barriers, 5 or 6 obstacles and problems which had to be solved. They discuss small-scale, medium-scale business and all the platform, both finances, the system of state procurement, and some easy credits and subsidies for various rates and all these things that have been discussed. The regions are very different. The norms are really different. But entering there, making networks and sharing your project is very hard. That's why, for the moment, it's 1%. But as a firm percent, these are the ones who hold on, who move forward without being afraid of anything. What is this 1%? So these are social entrepreneurs, small-scale, medium-scale business, which is involved in social entrepreneurship, though they don't have a status. But that's not healthcare if we're speaking about the medical things. If there is a medical license,
it's not only schools, those are private projects in various areas. There is also a certain methodology for assessment for SMEs, as the one that we took from the United States. So it's not the same as SMEs working in social services. Well, yes, it's clear. Criteria should be clear. Thank you very much. Alexei Sidnev, you now have the floor. You're the head of the non-state partnership. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad to take part in this discussion. I happen to be an expert in social entrepreneurship. I myself don't consider that what I do is social entrepreneurship, because I am an entrepreneur who works in the social sphere, because my task is to make money while resolving social problems. But I fully agree to Ms. Oshakova. In Russia, there's still no such term as social entrepreneurship. Across the globe, this is the area where SMEs are involved, but in Russia it's not the case. What we heard from the first two Svetlanas, they spoke about non-governmental sector in areas where there is no need for investment. That is the area where there should be no government at all. That is the area where NGOs operate in the whole world, but in Russia the situation is different. Why is it like that? We try to find some ways to change it. You see, the PPPs do not work here. Box solutions also are not appropriate. I agree with the colleagues from the National Economic Bank. For the business to build one facility that costs 3 to 4 million rubles, for the state that would cost 5 million rubles. So you see that using government funds is not efficient. One more issue. The private sector invests heart and soul into that work. So what I say, we do not need PPPs at all in that area. The example of Moscow and the example of St. Petersburg shows that there is no need for PPPs. If we want to make social entrepreneurship successful, it should be paid for. Who pays for it? Well-off people do. But there are some areas where there are no people like that, and that's the area where government tariffs should come into play. If the state honestly says that we need tariffs, and if there are tariffs there, then SMEs could get involved. How much would that cost? The big cities spend a lot more than the private organizations in that area. PPPs can operate in areas where there is no commercial demand. Yes, there are many areas where there are a lot of old people who cannot pay. But if the government is honest and they say how much it costs in effectively, then of course many companies would be interested. Next year, the profit tax benefits would be repealed. What you could do is tax benefits for all the companies in that area. When the SMEs grows, then we could be taxed. But when there are no profits, then of course the taxation should be lower. As for the building of new facilities, we should make every opportunity to be accessible. If you want this area to be developed, the money will resolve the issue. More investments, the SMEs are open, the business is open. We are ready to cooperate, we are ready to train and teach other people so that you see that it can be successful. We wanted to make operable for everyone. Thank you for your opinion. 1 second. We'll give the floor to the next speaker before we close. We can stay a bit longer here. We want everybody to have a chance to express themselves. I see that nobody has mentioned that so far. We should discuss the models for the yield assessment. This is an important assessment criteria. I'm just thinking about the, for instance, exams that will be taken by kids, and then the investors would have to pay for their failure. The same goes for access in the regions. Some indicators, like basic indicators, are very risky. That might make people go out of business. That would lead to corruption and to the failure of the whole market. Alexey Mikhailovich, it seems that now it's your turn to take the floor. The Ministry of Finance has tried to make social services more competitive. We see that there are some achievements and important headways in this area. Do you have any other good ideas that could help us to address the challenges? Dear colleagues, I am rather perplexed. I thought that we need to create conditions to involve SMEs, to involve NGOs, PPPs, or concessions, and then there are people who say that we do not need PPPs. What should we do? I have a story to share. My friend built a healthcare center, but there are no clients. He said, I invested 30 million into that, 300 million into that, but nobody's coming. Do you think this is the PPP, a concession? What is it? What center has he built? If people finally invest there, if they get access to the public funds, there are some people who choose between different services, so the business does not know what to do in this situation. If we agree on the way the system should operate, then maybe tens of thousands of dollars could be used more efficiently. But, would be glad to see an example of at least 1 million rubles that has been profitable on the market of the social services. We have been speculating here, but we want to see some good examples. Where are the results? The solutions and products of Sberbank. You have them, but they do not seem to be very popular. The Tambov region, what are the results that they can share there? A lot of regions do not develop the social services sector at all. The law does not provide for that. But there are some people who want to be involved in that area, and they find the way to interpret the law. They know that there are some people who demand this area to be developed. The draft law that we have now introduced in the parliament, we've been working on that for 3 years. Now it's important to adopt the draft. That would cause heated debate in the parliament, but if it is adopted, then the regions will know that they can run the social services market, and that would make it possible. This is one thing that we've done. I really liked the statement made by Alexander. We don't know how many free services we provide from the budget. 3.9 trillion rubles are spent on the social sphere. But social services, the social sphere, are not taken into account here. Subsidies, the support of NGOs, we do not know how much money goes there. What is the overall amount of the free of charge services provided? No one knows. There should be the job done in this area. Our draft law would resolve this problem. There is the designated agency in the region who would state how many services should be provided to the residents. So there would be this work in every region done on the permanent basis, and that will make us aware of the situation on the ground. How are the services rendered? Through public procurement? Well, maybe. But let's see, do we need so many public agencies? Could there be some services that are shared by the municipalities? Could there be joint competition between the state and the region? We do not want to force anyone, but we need to make it clear to our citizens what is going to be done and how much money is going to be invested. That's important not only to social entrepreneurs. It's not very clear to say who is social entrepreneurs and who are not social. It seems that entrepreneurs work in good priority areas. They need to make profits to be entrepreneurs over it all. That's why, to me, it doesn't seem to be very comfortable when they say, oh, please subsidize us, give us benefits. You know, it seems that businesses should be self-sufficient and solvent. Anyway, so that's the amount of money that we have. These are the services we need to provide. And then there would be something to resolve already. The key problem here is to decide on who has the access to the funds. If everyone would be entitled to that, then we'll see some developments there. If the access is not equitable, then the situation would not improve. So what are the standards? We should have the standards that are clear. We should make them closer to life. We will give payments to non-state sectors. It seems that the budget funds should be accessible to all the players. That's something that we've been working on. Now, the VAT tax, you know that there is the project to introduce new amendments into the fiscal law, and it's going to be passed. The access to real estate. You know that the municipalities have a lot of real estate, but it isn't used efficiently. How could we ensure the equal access to all players here? The question that arises here is, why do we differentiate between those who have access? Why don't we make it equal for everyone? To make this real estate accessible, it is a difficult issue, because there is the civil code, other things come into play. So I think we need to make a list, and you could authorize a mandate the finance ministry to solve, for instance, 5 issues, and that will make us efficient. Or otherwise, you'd say, well, I see now that there is no clarity, and that's precisely what we are aiming at. Now we are on a threshold of an important decision. If the law is passed, that will change the conditions, that will change the practices, and everything that we've been discussing for the past years would be able to become real. That would be something that we'd have for the first time. That would be the practice that has a priority for the government. We'll be able to make people accountable. Thank you. Oh, you made some revolutionary suggestions. I invite everyone to the hearings of the draft law in the Civil Chamber on the 14th of October. Well, we might need to reschedule. It's on the 14th of September. Well, we would have to change the date to see you there. Without you, that would not be possible. I'd like to make a brief comment. It doesn't seem that there are different opinions. We want to come to common ground. because we all came to the financial forum and we need to have a consolidated result. I want to have good results every day, so today is not an exception. Alexia said that there should be conditions if there are tariffs. What I said was the story of investments. So that picture is familiar. There's no agreement.
I'll give a bit different position, maybe. It will be a little bit of like too much. I have a feeling that today, in 2018, there is a so-called ideal storm. The government perfectly understands it from the point of view of people who are elder. Bearing in mind that 1.7, 1.2, we know this digit. I think it's even less. I think so. My first education is financial, second one is pharmaceutical. The second topic, part of citizens have already invested in this wonderful sphere as a social one. On the other hand, it has sounded not for the first time that high-tech medicines cannot be stopped. We will live long and happily. And longer. So the question, probably there are professionals here remaining who are not interested, already left. If we unite our efforts after the 14th of September and to connect not the banking developments from the point of view of development and the government not asking what is needed but what each and every person can do. Each and every one made something, put a signature behind that, on that, and guess what is needed? And the law appears. I think, frankly speaking, that we need both. Lida Yurievna Mikhailova, Deputy Secretary. Dear colleagues, as a lawyer, I wanted to briefly and extremely specifically express myself on the issue which is discussed. A few years ago, when Svetlana Viktorovna was working in the Ministry of Finance and discussing the civil code, she said a wonderful phrase that municipal entities, social municipal entities, are the hands of the state. Sergei Mikhailovich is saying that these hands have to be more numerous, they have to be different, various, and you can choose a hand you need. And today I'm not going to doubt to argue that, and I absolutely support that, because freedom of choice and competition is obviously great. And nothing else in the conditions of this economic segment should not be there. And as a lawyer, while estimating this law, which our colleagues were preparing, I was worried only for one issue. With my comrades on the council, only responsibility was our concern for the quality, for the terms, for the safety and of the services. And I wanted to say that the document which was introduced by the State Duma allowed this and that and other many issues. It does not give a single scenario for that. It admits the possibility of multi-phasal use of various funds and specifically describes the formats of use of budget funds. And this format becomes a competitive one. Secondly, it quite clearly gives the answers to the question how the consumer will be protected in these services, and that's the key point for us. In the draft, for the moment, there is responsibility. There can be no other model, and directly the one who performs that will be responsible in front of the consumer because he enters the contract relations. But as budget is paying for this service, I see there mechanisms for protection. of this treaty. If I understand correctly, maybe colleagues from Ministry of Finance will correct me. Payments on certificates will not be there unless the act is signed, unless the positive report is provided. Did I understand it wrong? Okay, so probably we'll have to discuss it somehow, and to the second reading we have to propose something else. That's an interesting topic, and that has to be discussed because it will be a concern for the citizens. They're listening to us, they're watching that, and they understand that money from National Bank will not come to every family, and maybe not the day after tomorrow as the money of Sberbank, probably. But the budget money will definitely be spent for that list of mandatory services which must be provided to certain categories of citizens. And what is the most interesting thing, what we want to understand, is a question of how the quality is provided. Because for the moment, I want to say that, as far as I understand, it will be provided by a post-paid method. If no, we're speaking about on zero readings, actually. Thank you. Thank you, Ilya Dimitrov. Thanks a lot to the Ministry of Finance for the invitation. And I would rather work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if I worked there. I'm not an expert for social segments, but I think, as a person looking from the side, because we were a part of preparing the legal act, I think there is a problem. The problem is that, let me just give a few examples to make it a bit more clear. If we take a current civil servant and give him an opportunity to manage airport, not one and a few ones, the system of management will be the following. He is calling the workers, said how many aircrafts are in the air, how many are prepared, and how many are in the airport. He said, when will be the next report? In a quarter of a year. Now the system of management, unfortunately, it looks like that. The social segment looks like that and works in the same format. And without changing the management system from the point of view, like socially, like what His Excellency the Deputy Minister told us, would not understand what we're managing. Preparing a law, I think it is important, and it will partly remove this problem, but we have to institutionally reboot the thinking and not start from the current system, but we have to digitalize it and to model it from the future, make modeling. If we are not starting to forecast these or that social effects, this or that consumers which will appear today, tomorrow, and so on, and to find it, it will not be a success, whatever you do. Introduction of services which are provided by banks, from all pictures, they pull a piece of that and they're trying to solve it. But systematically, it does not solve the situation or take some effects, distributing the money and so on and so forth. I think we have to reconsider probably the management system, and if we do not reconsider that, I think it will be a chaotic movement, and then it will be classic. We are hard to be misled. We don't care where we're leading to. We were speaking not much about that and changing the management system, and indeed we have to think about it. And I'm responsible for protection of entrepreneurs' rights in the electronic trade and electronic commerce and providing electronic services. And now, Ivan, I wanted to give the floor to Ivan Bektin, information culture. You have the floor. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It happened to be that I am working with commercial sector from the perspective of its transparency, and we are dealing with open NGOs and non-commercial organizations. There is another project, which in other words is called the Ministry of Justice of Russia. We created a project on monitoring a non-commercial organization. The first thing we faced is that we don't really understand the segment we're managing. 25% of register of NGO is not actual, has not full data, is full of mistakes, and the ministry is aggressively fighting any attempt to correct it. That's why I can only tell you that not Ministry of Finance is managing the commercial sector. Nevertheless, if we have a question that NGOs are performing the social network, we have a very big issue on transparency, how non-commercial sector is going to do that. For budget entities, there are certain requirements on they're working within the 44th law 223 within the expense their costs, and there is a state gov.ru where they disclose big massive information on their activity. As for non-commercial sector, for the moment, there is only on federal level we have the disclosure of information on how non-commercial organizations get the subsidies, the register of subsidies, for example, and the governmental money. But when it goes to the level of subjects of federation, we cannot restructure that and understand it, who really got the money if the law is not number 44. Unfortunately, the whole of that information is being lost. If we rearrange the budget entity and we get some non-commercial organizations, all the sums which would go to the entities is one of the opinions. All this money, all these funds which are going to these organizations will not be transparent for the citizens, and there is a separate request for the draft law. We have to preserve at least the transparency without restricting the procedure how the money should be spent. But as for the money which they get, the transparency should be preserved. It can be done by, for example, we developed special standard which we suggest for the state as a protector of public interest, spreading the money. Makes disclosure of information mandatory about the structure of governance, on their income and their costs, and the projects which they operate in, which they are performing. Because within the framework of basic monitoring of the non-commercial organizations, 90% of these organizations have neither their charters on their official websites. Half of them don't have even website. They don't have pages in the social media. They started to appear only when the fund of presidential grants started massively impose or say that if you don't have it, you are not in our criteria of informational openness. I'm speaking about very basic things which budget entities really meet the requirements, and this non-commercial sector does not do it. Commercial sector is strange, but really meets the requirements to a better extent, and our non-commercial sector is absolutely not transparent, the most non-transparent part of Russians. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have to come to a conclusion, but if maybe somebody of those who did not deliver a speech, somebody wants to express himself briefly, we still have a small opportunity. Does somebody want to say, or I give the floor to Oksana Vasilyevna? I will briefly say, just in a working order, we came to the law, to the draft. We're speaking about mechanisms and how hard it was to develop them and how hard it was to prove the need of them. We're glad that these mechanisms are successful, and we're speaking about the system of management. The point is that we wanted to roll back this basis a little bit to what we were speaking about, what really is an obstacle for us. Why not in all regions everything is going gradual, and the problem is the only one. I want to pay special attention on that. The problem is that we are not working to the full, we're not finishing the things we should go together with adoption of the law, or going after the adoption of the law, or even before the adoption of the law. We do not prepare people to what we will have, to the fact that we'll have revolutionary changes in normative and regulatory basis in the order of communication and cooperation. People are not aware of that. The citizens are not aware of that. The authorities are not aware of that. And the competence level, well, and the new law is being adopted is always extremely low. That is why it is one of the serious obstacles for the quality and efficient activity on implementation of legislation. The financial experts know. They are told there for 3 years. The financial experts know, but the citizens do not. Don't. Why citizens should know that? They have to be ready that there will be a different opportunity. Dear colleagues, this position can lead to the serious consequences which appeared when a whole segment dropped out of this draft culture. It did not happen so because of citizens. Yeah, it did not was not that were not citizens to blame, but there were non-commercial organizations. In fact, both the non-commercial organizations and the law. All right. I just want to interrupt you. I just have to interrupt you. Unfortunately, we have no time left. Of course, we have lots of discussional issues, and I didn't start to provoke the discussion on PPP, whether it's helping or not, on citizens, and there's a separate story. And Khabarovsk region told that they are making videos for new suppliers of social services represented by non-commercial organizations, and they are demonstrating them. Just one phrase. What's the good part of this law? It is a self-unpacking practice. It will create extra route itself for the work of state and municipal civil servants, because we will have increase in transparency, and they will have chance to refuse this practice, but to provide some kind of argumentation. We are now going from position to arguments. We will have numbers. We should not miss any opportunity going into serious negotiation. And the citizens can wait for a little bit. This law is for them, for the end. I also was really impressed that, Ivan, you told us about the law will contribute to better transparency, not only to data, but to suppliers themselves. And speaking in a more simple terms, we had quite clumsy and messy section. Many topics were referred to, and if last year I remember our platform absolutely the same, it all led to the fact that we need a law. Now we have a draft, and now a number of obstacles we hope will reduce with adoption of the draft of the law, but not everything will be solved immediately. But it's like a rocket carrier. Everything on what was named the toughest problems which everybody was thinking about but were afraid to say were named by Alexei Mikhailovich. No fundamentalist, but Alexei Mikhailovich, we will definitely collect it all. Natalia Borisovna, please come to Duma's committees if you can. You asked to transfer all the barriers which exist. We have all them in one place. We'll transfer them to you. And if, as colleagues proposed, we can call it whom is ready to do for the solution there. It would also be quite a good contribution, quite a good task to solve. I think our next phase is to already see the final adoption of the law and to follow that and to solve these massive challenges which we still have, which we are still having, and what we can, if we succeed to do what Alexander Mikhailovich said. But I can hardly believe that. But I believe that next forum we will discuss where we succeeded. Thank you so much. Thanks to the Ministry of Finance for the platform, the speakers, and to the participants. Thank you.
Какой хорошенький блокнотик. Да.
За какие именно лучше брать? Я уже сам хотел. określał możliwości